Despite what some people say, the Spirit is one of the most difficult killers you can play in Dead by Daylight. That is why I decided to play her for a whole month and learn all the tricks and secrets used by the best Spirit players in the community. This video is a compilation of everything I learned during that time and aims to take you from complete beginner to playing on the same level as a P100 with thousands of hours. Before we get into it though, I want to clarify that this isn't a tips and tricks type of video. Instead, I will be focusing on the fundamentals around the Spirit and her ability. I still suggest watching through this video even if you are confident at playing the Spirit, as I will talk a lot about the mindset you need to have to improve with her and the best ways to improve. When you finish this video, or if you just wanted tips and tricks, I suggest watching this video, where I talk about small but powerful tricks you can use while playing the Spirit. The Spirit is a 110% movement speed killer. That means that she moves at 110% of the normal survivor movement speed. 110% is rather slow for a killer, however, as most move at 115%. A 5% speed difference sounds negligible, but as you probably realize playing one of the slower killers, it's a huge deal. This is because you actually remove 33% of the speed difference between killer and survivor when removing 5% speed. In other words, it takes 33% longer to catch a survivor and can be functionally viewed as a 33% speed nerf. That is why it's such a big deal. To compensate for this, the Spirit has a really strong ability. Yamaoka's Haunting lets her face at 176% movement speed, making it easy to catch survivors in almost any loop. She also becomes invisible while facing, meaning it's really difficult to predict her movement as a survivor. To make her ability fair, there are also two added downsides. Firstly, just like how the Spirit is invisible to survivors while facing, the survivors are invisible to the Spirit. This means you need to be good at predicting survivor movement, as you cannot tell directly where they are. The second downside is that she makes a loud directional whooshing sound while facing that can be heard by survivors. Without add-ons, the Spirit can face for up to 5 seconds, where the longer you face, the longer the cooldown is, up to 15 seconds. Sound is a really important game mechanic to play the Spirit, as both she and the survivors rely on sound cues to figure out where the other is. Most interactions have unique sounds, such as falling, healing, vaulting pallets or windows, going in and out of lockers, and repairing generators. Telling which is which out of these can help a lot, but the most important sounds when playing the Spirit are the grunts survivors make when in the injured state and the breathing sounds they make while running. These are usually very distinct and give great clues to where a survivor is heading. However, these noises aren't static, but actually change depending on what the survivors are doing. The grunts can be suppressed by perks such as Iron Will and Auto Record, and if the survivor is crouching, all noises they make are 50% quieter. The breathing noises have similar mechanics. When running, survivors start breathing loudly. The longer they run, the louder this noise gets. As many skilled survivors are aware of this mechanic, they might try to walk mid-chase when possible and crouch while they face to make their noises much more difficult to hear. This is something to keep in mind if you stop hearing the footsteps of the survivor. Just knowing that the Spirit's ability is strong and her normal chase is weak is a great start, but it's equally important to know how to use her ability. In general, there are two ways to use it: offensively in chase and defensively to travel faster when patrolling. Generally, you should want to save your ability to use in chase, but if you think you can recharge it before you find the next survivor, or if you really need to pressure a generator that's almost finished for instance, using it to travel faster is a valid choice. To effectively use her ability in chase, you need to split the ability into 3 parts. The first part is deciding when and where to start your ability. When you spot a survivor, the first thing you do is to determine whether or not they have seen you, and whether they will make it to the next pallet or window. If not, just face and try to not be tricked, as skilled survivor will try to be unpredictable and run in different directions to throw you off. If they seem to make it, however, try to determine whether or not the tile they reach is safe or not. If it seems unsafe, you can start facing immediately. However, if it seems safe, wait to use your ability until you can put yourself in a spot the survivor is likely to run through. This is because you leave a husk with full collision once you start facing, so if you body block their loop, you might catch them off guard. Ideally, this means putting your husk right on a pallet so they cannot run a full lap and drop the pallet once you catch up. However, most skilled survivors will try to leave the loop or drop the pallet before you get a chance to do that, so try to be sneaky with it. The second part of phasing is knowing how and where to move mid-phase. Here, it is important to know that the spirit speed is a lot faster than the survivors, and many mind games that would be impossible with other killers are very doable while phasing. The first thing you need to know is to figure out whether or not a mind game is even necessary. If you don't think the survivor will make it to the window or pallet, simply paying attention and listening for their movement is good enough to get a hit. It is when they reach a pallet or window that we start thinking of mind games. The first and easiest mind game is to simply follow them and swinging as soon as possible. Most of the time, this results in a miss or pallet stun, as this is the behavior survivors expect. However, sometimes this can also catch them off guard for the exact same reason. Slightly more advanced is the double back. This means that you start going one way around the loop before backing around and going the other way. This might make them drop the pallet preemptively as they think you are going the other way, which most of the time results in a hit. Another way to mind game is to use the whooshing sound the spirit emits while phasing to your advantage. For instance, as the whooshing sound is only directional if the survivor has line of sight, you can hug walls to make it harder to estimate your location. This is, however, very situational, so don't expect much use of it most of the times. Another thing you can do is moonwalk while phasing. This means that you turn the camera away from where you're going. This is a common technique for M1 killers to hide their red stain, but also works with the spirit as her directional audio is slightly in front of her, so if you turn the camera away, it sounds slightly more distant than it is. There are plenty more ways to mind game, but these are my favorite techniques that I succeed the best with. The third and final part of phasing is understanding when to stop phasing and when to swing. In some cases, this is very obvious. If you know you're right on top of the survivor, or if you know they're vaulting the location you're swinging at, you simply leave the phase right as you have to start lunging. However, that's not always going to be the case. Sometimes you will lose track of the survivor, or be unsure of where exactly they are located. Then it can be beneficial to stop phasing early, so you can visibly spot the survivor before you're forced to swing. Just remember that the spirit only moves at 110% movement speed, so the survivor has a high likelihood of making it to another window or pallet if you aren't very close to them. Now that you know the basics to playing the spirit, we need to learn how you can improve. And in order to improve, it is important to know what you need to improve. Killers in Dead by Daylight play very differently and require vastly different skill sets to play well. Hunters, for instance, requires you to aim well and have a good understanding of both survivor movement and trajectories of the hatchets. Trapper, on the other hand, requires a good understanding of the macro game to know where to put the traps and a ton of luck. As for the spirit, the thing you need to improve is your game sense. More specifically, you need to understand and be able to predict where a survivor is most likely to go and what they are most likely to do in any scenario.
What if I close my eyes and try this? Did that work? Did that come close?
Learning to do this instinctually is especially important for the spirit, as you cannot see survivors while phasing, meaning you just rely on your game sense along with small audio cues to figure out where survivors are. Improving game sense is something you do slowly over time, as you play through many different scenarios and see how survivors act. This takes thousands of hours, and my goal here is to speed up that process a lot by showing you how you can practice this exact skill. The first step is to understand what sets apart good game sense from great game sense. For instance, if you're chasing a survivor through an open area, and there is only one window nearby, it is safe to assume the survivor will try to vault said window. This is something we know thanks to previous experiences. Firstly, survivors can vault faster than killers, and secondly, the survivor does not want to stay in an open area. This example is obvious to most of us because you don't need a lot of previous experience. However, what sets a player with higher game sense apart is what information they can add to this. For instance, a person with a bit more game sense might add that the window leads to a safe tile, and that the pallet of said tile likely hasn't been dropped, and this is a lot better, as it reads further into the full course of action of the survivor, which can help you path differently, say trying to intercept them to the pallet rather than the window. A person with brilliant game sense, however, will acknowledge that it's not only the path the survivor can take, as they can always double back when the spirit starts phasing, or in other ways try to be unpredictable. They also know that it doesn't matter, as the spirit can also prepare themselves for all possible courses of action. So, now that you have a concrete example, how do you use this to build your game sense? The explanation for this is much easier than the practice, but you just need to think about these things in your own games. Whenever you have a similar situation, weigh all your options and figure out what course of action covered the most probable of the survivor's options. Find out what you need to do to have the highest chance of catching the survivor. If you're unsure of how to do this, try to watch skilled players' gameplay and try to replicate the thought process they might have with your own ideas. This will be very difficult if you're not used to it, but after a while it will come more naturally, and that is the goal. Also, don't be discouraged if you start playing worse or lose more matches while practicing. It is much better to lose a chase and know why you lost than to win a chase but have no clue how you won. With the most important parts out of the way, here are a few smaller things that helped me a lot with improving at the Spirit, such as picking the right add-ons. Unlike some killers, the Spirit isn't too dependent on her add-ons. Most are actually decent. However, from my experience, the best add-ons to pick are generally the ones that improve movement speed, recharge rate, and charge speed. This is because all of these actively help in quickly closing down distance and shutting down chases. Movement speed add-ons are my go-to, as they not only help with closing distance, but also increase the Spirit's mind game potential. Because you move faster, the survivors are forced to make their decisions even faster, increasing the chance for slip-ups and blunders. The best add-ons for this is the Mother-Daughter Ring, as it increases your movement speed while facing by 25%. I would however be careful with using it, as it has a huge downside. You will no longer be able to see scratch marks while facing. For more experienced killers, this isn't a big deal, but if you're new to the Spirit or you struggle to hear the survivors, it can be detrimental. I prefer the Muddy Sports Day Cap. While it only increases movement speed by 10%, you get to keep the scratch marks. It is also tournament standard, so if you plan on doing scrims or tournaments, this is the add-on you want to get used to. Recharge rate add-ons are also very useful, with Rusty Flute being arguably the best add-on for the Spirit. This is because she has a lot of downtime between cooldowns and struggles to work as an M1 killer. With the Rusty Flute add-on, recharge rate is increased by 40%, meaning the cooldown goes from 15 seconds to 10.7 seconds from full depletion. This can be extra handy if you get your first hit with the power, as the swing cooldown is 2.7 seconds. This means you only have to wait 8 seconds for the ability. Finally, charge speed add-ons help reduce the time you have to stand still to charge up your ability. Without add-ons, this is 1.5 seconds. With the add-on White Hair Ribbon, the charge speed is increased by 20%, meaning it only takes 1.25 seconds to charge up. 0.25 seconds isn't a huge gain, but it can make a difference if you're trying to close distance. While most add-ons work well on the Spirit, there are 2 add-ons you should avoid at all costs. The first are add-ons that extend duration. While their descriptions say they extend the ability, what they really do is add more charges to the total pool. This means that while you get a longer ability when using it, the cooldown increases by an equal amount. This is really bad, as the Spirit's cooldown already is really long. It does not need to get longer. The second add-on to avoid is called Dried Cherry Blossom. This add-on gives you killer instinct when you're close to the survivor, but has the drawback of removing scratch marks. The issue with this add-on is that killer instinct isn't consistent, so once the survivor gets better, it loses value. The second reason I recommend against it, even as a beginner, is because it works as a crutch, where you will start to rely on the killer instinct instead of sound and game sense. This will severely cripple your chances to improve. Another small yet important thing is choosing the right perks. Unlike add-ons, choosing perks for the Spirit is like walking across a minefield. Half of them either don't work or straight up make you worse. This is because of the Spirit's specific game mechanics. For instance, aura reading perks are borderline useless because the Spirit cannot see auras while facing. Perks that remove terror radius are also pointless because the Spirit will make a whooshing sound while facing, defeating the whole purpose. Then we have Strider. It might seem like a good perk on paper, increasing the volume of grunts by 50% and breathing by 25%. However, this just acts as a crutch, as both of these noises are plenty loud to hear. Additionally, it might get you into the habit of trying to listen your way to the survivor instead of reading them with game sense. The types of perks that work well with the Spirit are gen slowdown perks, such as Corrupt Intervention, Grim Embrace, Pain Res, and Pop Goes the Weasel and Eruption. Perks that help hooking, such as Starstruck and Agitation, and chase perks are also decent, but not really required as the Spirit's chase ability is already great. A good chase perk though is Bamboozle. My favorite build is currently Pain Res, Grim Embrace, Agi, and Sloppy Butcher. Pain Res and Grim Embrace slow the game down a lot, especially if you can get the first hook before the first gem pops. Agitation helps a lot with reaching a hook, especially if you have survivors taking hits to slow you down or sabotaging hooks. And Sloppy Butcher is also really good for slowing down survivors healing, even after its recent nerf. My last advice is to not give up. The spirit is very difficult to learn and even harder to master. Learning her would take a lot of effort and practice, but if you took all the advice in this video, you're already a good way there. If you want to learn more advanced tricks you can apply in your spirit games, I have another video where I talk about the smaller tips and tricks I found while playing her. Or, if you want to optimize your game audio to hear every footstep and grunt crystal clear, I have a video on that as well. Thank you for watching, I hope to see you soon.